At the beginning of the story, we see a 12-year-old boy named Renato. His father buys him a bicycle, and excitedly, Renato rides it around the city and meets his friends. His friends are thrilled to see the new bike. One of them suddenly says, "She's coming this way. Everyone sit down." Everyone quickly sits. Renato has no idea who's coming. Just then, the most beautiful woman in the city walks past them. Her name is Malena. Renato can't take his eyes off her. He's completely captivated, unable to look away. After that, Renato and his friends start following Malena on their bicycles. Malena's father is a school teacher who lives alone, though he's a bit hard of hearing. Renato and his friends attend the same school. Malena is married, but her husband is rarely home because he serves in the army. Because of her extraordinary beauty, almost every man in town is obsessed with Malena. They often stand around just to catch a glimpse of her. On the other hand, the women in town envy her and secretly wish they could be as beautiful as she is. Later, we see Renato at school. He keeps thinking about Malena and can't focus on his studies. When school ends, Renato rides his bicycle to Malena's house and waits by the roadside just to see her come out of her home.
Then Malena comes out of her house and calls Renato over. She gives him some money and asks him to buy cigarettes for her. At that moment, Renato snaps out of his imagination. He realizes he was just daydreaming while sitting there the whole time. Later, Renato sneaks into his house, steals a pair of his father's pants, and takes them to a tailor, asking him to adjust the size to fit him. But when his father finds out, he beats Renato badly and shouts, "You're still a kid, too young for long pants." Renato knew Malena was married, yet he couldn't stop thinking about her. One night, he climbs a tree and secretly watches her through the window. He keeps following her day and night. One evening, Renato hides and sees Malena dancing alone in her room. He keeps watching her silently, mesmerized, while Malena has no idea someone is spying on her. The next day, Renato buys a cassette from a music shop, the same song Malena was dancing to the night before. That night, he plays the song in his room and imagines Malena dancing again. Suddenly, he imagines her walking into his room and he feels overjoyed, but it's all just in his imagination. The following day, while riding his bicycle, Renato follows Malena again. He notices that everyone in town, from rich businessmen to poor laborers, even high-ranking officers, can't take their eyes off her. They all look at her with lustful gazes. Because of that, their wives hate Malena. They gossip about her, insult her, and treat her badly since they don't want their husbands to look at another woman. But Malena never responds to their harsh words. She always stays quiet and endures everything silently.
Malena was very loyal to her husband. Every day, she used to visit her father because he was old and needed someone to remind him to take his medicines on time. Malena took care of him with great devotion. Renato, as usual, followed her there and secretly watched from a distance. The next day, a group of army officers and government officials arrived in the town. Through loudspeakers, they announced that several soldiers had died in the war, and among them was Malena's husband. Hearing this news, the townspeople began to act differently. The men were secretly excited, thinking Malena was now alone, while the women whispered behind her back. Malena, on the other hand, broke down in tears. She loved her husband deeply, and losing him shattered her. Heartbroken and lonely, she left her own home and went to live with her elderly father. From outside, Renato watched her cry through the window. A few days later, Renato sneaked into Malena's yard and stole some of her clothes that were hanging out to dry. That night, he held those clothes close to him, thinking of her until he fell asleep. The next morning, his father entered his room and was shocked to see the clothes. Furious, he scolded Renato harshly, and his mother also beat him out of shame and anger. After that, his father locked him in a room as punishment. Renato remained confined for 3 days. Without proper food and air, he fell ill. Worried, his parents called a doctor. After examining Renato, the doctor said he needed proper meals and some fresh air. So, after recovering a little, Renato took his bicycle and went out again. While riding through town, he noticed that people were spreading nasty rumors about Malena. The women were saying she had inappropriate relationships with local men, and even some men were gossiping and speaking about her disrespectfully.
But Renato knew Malena was not that kind of woman. The next day, while Malena's father was teaching at school, he received a letter. It said, "Your daughter is a disgrace. She's having affairs with many men in town." After reading it, he became furious and in anger threw Malena out of his house. Heartbroken, Malena returned to her own home. One night, while Renato was watching her secretly from a tree, he saw an army officer visiting Malena, and it looked like they were having an affair. Seeing that broke Renato's heart. A while later, when the officer stepped outside, a local dentist attacked him out of jealousy, because he too desired Malena. Soon after, the dentist's wife arrived there with the police. She shouted that her husband was having an affair with Malena and filed a case against her. The scandal spread like wildfire across the entire town. Everyone began whispering that Malena was involved with married men. Tired and humiliated, Malena grew anxious and went to a powerful lawyer in town to fight the case. The lawyer agreed, but only because he wanted to take advantage of her situation. During the court hearing, the lawyer argued that Malena had no affair with the dentist and that the officer was merely her friend. In the end, the lawyer won the case for her. Later, he went to Malena's house, and Malena tried to pay his fee, but his charges were too high. The lawyer then began taking payment in his own way. Renato, hiding nearby, saw everything. Shocked, he slipped from the tree and fell, injuring his arm badly. After that, Malena started meeting the lawyer more often. She had no job, no income, and no one willing to help her. The lawyer covered her expenses, so she was forced to comply with his demands. But when the lawyer's mother discovered the affair, she confronted him angrily and beat him, saying he had brought shame upon their family. After that, the lawyer broke things off with Malena. Once again, Malena was left completely alone. No one in town would give her work, and the small pension she used to receive from her late husband's service was also stopped. One night, in despair, Malena cut her long hair short. The entire town had been spreading lies and insults about her, even though she had done nothing wrong. So finally, broken and bitter, she decided, if everyone insists on calling her bad, then she would become exactly what they believed her to be.
The next day, Malena appeared in town looking completely different, like a new woman. People stared at her as she walked through the streets, amazed by her bold new look. Many of the men smiled, clearly pleased to see her dressed that way. Malena sat down on a chair, took out a cigarette, and put it between her lips. A few men came near her, and one of them eagerly lit her cigarette. As she inhaled, Malena thought bitterly, "When I tried to live with dignity, they didn't let me. And now, when I've lost everything, they all want to take advantage of me." So out of helplessness, she began doing whatever she needed to survive, even if it meant selling her own dignity for money. One day Malena went to a hotel with a man. Renato saw everything from a distance. His heart ached. He didn't want Malena to live like that. He wanted to help her, but he was just a child, too young to do anything. One day Renato saw Malena leave with a high-ranking officer. Unable to bear it, he fainted and collapsed. His family thought he was possessed by an evil spirit and took him to the church priest for help. Meanwhile, the town's women grew increasingly worried. Because of Malena, many of their marriages were falling apart. So one day a group of women decided to confront her. They stormed into a hotel and caught Malena red-handed with a man. They dragged her outside, tore her clothes, beat her brutally, and even cut her hair to humiliate her. The mob forced Malena to leave the town. No one, no man, no friend, no neighbor, came forward to protect her. Broken and deeply hurt, Malena decided she could no longer endure the shame, so she left the town for good. Renato watched all of it happen from afar, powerless and heartbroken. A few weeks later, Malena's husband returned to town, alive. He had survived the war, but had lost one of his arms. The townspeople were stunned to see him. He went straight home hoping to reunite with his wife, only to find strangers living there. Their homes had been destroyed in the war, so they had taken over his house. Malena's husband went around asking everyone about her, but nobody dared to tell her the truth. Some of his so-called friends spoke ill of her, spreading cruel lies about how she had lived while he was away. Enraged and confused, he struggled to understand what had really happened. Renato wanted to tell him everything, to defend Malena, but he couldn't gather the courage to speak. However, he knew where Malena had gone and which train she had taken. That night, he secretly left a letter for his husband. In the letter, Renato wrote that Malena still loved him deeply, and he included her current address, hoping it would help them find each other again.
So Malena's husband boarded a train and went in search of her. A year later, Malena returned to the same town, this time with her husband by her side. As they walked together down the familiar streets, everyone stopped and stared. The women of the town were stunned to see that Malena looked even more beautiful than before, but now she was with her husband, living with dignity once again. Seeing this, the women realized that Malena was no longer a threat to them. People were amazed by her strength and resilience. Gradually, the townsfolk began to speak of her with respect instead of contempt. When Malena went to the marketplace, the same women who had once beaten and humiliated her now greeted her politely, saying, "Good morning, madam." Malena smiled gently and replied, "Good morning," choosing to forgive and forget the past. As she was walking home from the market, a few fruits slipped from her basket and fell to the ground. Renato, who happened to be nearby, quickly came forward to help her pick them up. When Malena was about to leave, Renato softly said, "Good luck." She smiled faintly and walked away. Renato then rode off on his bicycle, thinking quietly to himself that he would never, ever forget Malena. And that's where the story ends.